The attack by American bombers on the heart of the Japanese Empire in April 1942, commonly known as the Doolittle Raid, probably stands out as one of the most strategically significant air attacks during all of World War II. On December 7, 1941, Japan used their combined Pacific Fleet in the infamous Pearl Harbor attack, consisting of 2 fast battleships, 6 aircraft carriers, 8 destroyers, 3 cruisers and submarine escorts, and a total of 360 aircraft. The attack was over in little more than 3 hours. By the end of the day, most of the US Pacific Fleet lay broken and burning. December to March brought even more significant advances by Japanese forces. The American generals began to realize that a bold stroke was needed to restore the morale of the public and of the fighting forces. The Japanese morale was soaring, and no one in Japan thought that the home islands would ever come under attack. But this was exactly what was about to happen. A very bold plan was hatched. It involved loading large bombers onto an aircraft carrier. It would be the first time that such large planes would be launched from a carrier, and they would not be able to land back on the carrier due to their size. The US Army Air Corps brought in Lieutenant Colonel James H. Jimmy Doolittle to lead the project and train the crews. The 800-foot flight deck was to be crammed with 16 twin-engine bombers. Usually, the B-25 had a takeoff run of 1,400 feet. The Hornet would only allow the heavily overladen bombers 500 feet. When the training had been completed, the Hornet left her west coast port for a rendezvous with the rest of the battle group. Approximately 600 miles from Japan, instead of the planned 400, the Nitto Maru made the first reported sighting of Admiral Halsey's task force and put the Japanese on the alert. Halsey ordered the Mitchells to be launched at once, ultimately accepting over 200 extra miles for the B-25s to fly. Doolittle's own bomber was the first to rumble down Hornet's pitching flight deck. Being the first plane meant he only had 467 feet of carrier to launch from. Between the speed of the carrier and the winds from stormy weather, he and the other pilots had the benefit of a 50-mile-an-hour headwind. Still, many of the planes nearly stalled on takeoff and seemed to hang over the high seas for an extended period before finally gaining altitude and lumbering into the sky. Immediately after the launch, Halsey hurriedly turned back to safe waters as the USA could not afford to lose a carrier. Once in the air, the bombers separated, each with its own set of targets. Surprise was the critical element to the raid, and it worked. Only one bomber was prevented from reaching its targets by Japanese fighters. A total of 4 cities were attacked: Tokyo, Kobe, Nagoya, and Yokosuka, and the bombers then headed off for the Chinese mainland. But the extra 200 miles meant the planes were low on fuel. One was forced to land in Russia, where the crew were interned, and another 2 crews were captured by Japanese soldiers in China. As President Roosevelt had calculated, the daring raid was the boost American morale needed. The end result was many fighter aircraft and soldiers were kept back on the Japanese mainland to guard against further attacks instead of being sent to islands in the Pacific. Their presence on those islands could have made the fight even more difficult or even impossible for Allied troops.